I got asked a question yesterday, what is an expense ratio? So we're going to look at that. Now the following video answers factual questions related to finance. Do not use any financial instrument mentioned in this video unless you found it to provide you with value. In addition, your employer may provide these financial instruments free of charge or at significant reduced charges. So purchasing them may be redundant in your financial situation. Do not buy any CUSIP mentioned in these videos unless you perform your due diligence, as any CUSIP mentioned is only used as for example purposes, and you and I may disagree on what makes a good investment, so make sure that this is actually something that you need. By the way, your employer will in many cases provide you with some of these for free when we talk about these investments or at reduced cost. It's like buying health care for yourself when you're already covered. Alright, so what is an expense ratio? We're going to look at three different funds, and this one is an ETF. This is the gold ETF from SPDR. I call it SPDR. It's just SPDR. Anyway, so expense ratios are what you pay to own a security like an ETF or a mutual fund. And in this case, we're going to look at mutual funds and ETFs specifically. Two of these I own, and one of them I don't. I do not own GLD. And remember, if I own something, that does not mean it is a good investment for you. It means that I like the investment and I think that it's worthy of buying. That does not mean for you it is. So, as you see here, you see a gross expense ratio. A lot of times when you see gross expense ratio, net expense ratio, etc., 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 you will see there's a link or a question mark or something, and they even explain it for you. Now, unless you really don't want to do any work, and this kind of really annoys me about Americans when they complain, but I just don't understand the terminology, and I'm like, they explain it. But you need to stop and read and focus, right? And you'll see that SPDR does a great job. It says the gross expense ratio is the fund's total annual operating expense ratio. It is gross of any fees or expense reimbursements. It can be found in the fund's most recent prospectus. Right? I was talking to a guy yesterday at a brokerage house, and he was sitting there saying, I don't know what it is with these kids nowadays. They just don't want to open up a prospectus and read. It's like they just want to sit there and they want to get and have great returns, but they don't want to read. And that's the point. You need to read. You also need to understand what the difference between 4% and 0.4%. And notice how they even were nice. They put a 0 before the decimal place. 0.4. Right? So $10,000, 4% is $400. $10,000, 0.4% is $40. There's a huge difference. Right? $360. Okay, so that's an example of how to find a gross expense ratio on this is SPDR. Now, all sites are different. That's why I'm going to use these other two. So this is another fund that I own. It is BlackRock iShares China Fund. It is a Hong Kong fund. I'm starting to move some of my funds elsewhere to stop buying U.S. funds local in the U.S. because I don't know if you all have seen, but Obama is yet another type trying to control financial advisors. And understand that anytime they do that, what it means is higher costs for you. Let them do what they're going to do. You can follow their advice or not. But so I realize I need to start liquidating my U.S. investments and moving them overseas because of this. I'm getting tired of, he is a control freak. I mean, anytime he does something terrible and then he continues to do things terrible. And this is an example. Now, here's the reason why I highlight that. If you're going to follow that advice and start moving more of your funds overseas and stop doing business with local U.S. brokerages and such, there is going to be a key here because they don't necessarily use the same terms. Hong Kong is much more capitalistic than America is, and so they expect you to use your brain, right? That's the great thing about capitalists is like, look, if you're not going to be smart with your money, then you're not going to keep it. All right, so in Hong Kong, or this fund, they do not call it an expense ratio. In this case, they call it a management fee, okay? And again, one thing nice about them, super cool about them, if you look, you can click on it, and it says the management fee is a measure of the cost associated with managing and operating the fund, including management and trustee fees, but excluding investment costs such as brokerage and access product charges. For complete information on fees and charges, please refer to the prospectus. So this is the management fee. You should check the prospectus because depending on your brokerage, there may be charges. I happen to know there's no additional charges in my case. You also see a premium discount, and you can look at that and look at the prospectus as to when the, you can see this here, you have the NAV and then you have the closing price, and these are not always the same, right? And so you might be able to get a discount between those, right? Okay, and this is an example of a non-US fund. You could tell it's really awesome because it's not regulated by the US, so I don't have to worry about, you know, all of the capricious laws that only make it more expensive for investors. Anytime you see regulation, it just means it's more expensive for you and me, right? So the reason why I like this one is it's not in the US, not regulated, and so they actually put a lot of good information because, you know, this is the great thing about capitalism is they want to do a good job for you, but they still expect you to do some of your own digging. Okay, so you can see it's not impossible to find. All right, so we've looked at gold. We've looked at the iShares China ETF. I own this. You should not buy this. This is, in my opinion, a good investment. And I don't want anything to do with the U.S. Like I said, it's time to fire every U.S. financial advisor. I'm just surprised that they're not taking a stand against these capricious laws. Just absurd. All right, now the next one. We have Oppenheimer's Developing Markets Fund. I want to use this one as an example because this one's a mutual fund. This is not an ETF. This is by far, to me, and only for my investment purposes, this is a great mutual fund. It has killed the S&P 500. And Oppenheimer has done a very good job. But that's my opinion, and that only works for me. And they put it right out there, too, as you see. You see the gross expense ratio and the net expense ratio. Now, right off the bat, some people will debate what these mean, and they have a nice little explanation. The net expense ratio, right? When it's that close, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion. But if you want to look, the net expense ratio, where applicable, also takes into account contractual fee waivers and or expense reimbursements without which performance would have been less. These undertakings may not be amended or withdrawn for 1 year from the date of the current prospectus unless approved by the board. Now, there's one thing to note about this, this fund and other funds. If you get a mutual fund or an ETF in your 401k, this is important. You need to look at the prospectus for your 401k. The reason is because this security here, I actually get at a discount. This is not the expense ratio that I pay because of the fact that I get it in a 401k. So I actually get a, I would say, a derivative. If you look, you see there's Class B, Class C, Class I, Class R, Class Y. And I don't remember which class they have in my brokerage. I'm sorry, my 401k, but anyway, wow, this doesn't pop up. That's interesting. Anyway, but it's different, right? It's completely different depending on what you look at. As you can see, the gross and net expense ratio, for instance, of the Class Y shares are different than the Class A shares. So, and then the other thing too is your employer may tell you, hey, just to let you know, we reimburse your expense ratios. Some of them do that. So that's great. Then you don't really even have to worry about it. It just depends. It's an awesome employer, by the way. Okay, so find the fund or ETF online and look through the documentation to find the expense ratio. Many funds and ETFs will provide examples like if you invest $10,000 a year, you will pay an expense of $40. I mean, I can't figure out why people can't look at that and figure out what that means. Oh, but they need Obama to help them out. Oh my gosh, you know, it's just too hard to understand what that means. It's, wow. Anyway, do not be afraid of math. We're not talking about calculus or trig, right? Any investing math that involves calculus or trig is BS. I've worked on Wall Street. Let me tell you something. I know how to trade. Anytime they start bringing out calculus, they're lying to you, right? All basic math in investing is addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, percents, rates. That's it. Okay? All the other stuff is BS, right? It's just by academics who are idiots. $10,000 at 1.2% is $120. $10,000 at 0.12% is $12. This should be a percent here. Okay, it's $12. That's 0.0012 is 0.12 is 0.12%. 1.2% is 0.012. If you understand this, you'll be okay. But if you refuse to take time and energy in your life to evaluate what you put your money in, expect to get average to below average results. Most people should buy index funds because they're too lazy to do any work. That's my own opinion, but it's the fact. How do I make a lot of money really fast? That's not a question to ask in investing, okay? Due diligence is required in anything, all right? Just to give you a closing example for the benefit of those of you who've actually watched this long in this video, I'm impressed. One of my good buddies who I worked with at a bank back in college, He had never been to college. Never. He dropped out of high school. He went and he worked in the entertainment industry. Didn't make very much money at all. But he ended up accumulating, I don't remember the exact amount, but I mean it was like $30,000 to $40,000 in savings. And he dropped $20,000 in 2009 on an investment that was $1 a share. That investment now, I'll check really fast, but I'm pretty sure, I think is $60 a share. I'm just going to check. There it is. And it went as high as $80. I'm sorry, it's $56 a share now, but it went as high as $88 a share. Okay, this is an individual who dropped out of high school, never went to college. So you say, how did he learn how to read a balance sheet and all that stuff? He just spent an evening learning it, right? You can get disproportionate returns if you'll invest some time and energy in learning. You will not get any returns if you want to just make money really fast and not know what you're doing, okay? That's an example of someone who doesn't even have an Ivy League education, doesn't even have a college education, didn't even finish high school, and still was able to get returns that are better than most mutual fund managers and most hedge fund managers out there. But he was willing to take time in his life and actually figure out how to invest, how to read a balance sheet, how to understand what like price to earning ratios, earning yields, all that stuff, right? So it's very easy to understand. It doesn't require calculus, and he's hardly an individual who's an expert in math. Anyone can do it, okay? But take the time, because you don't want to look back and wish you hadn't done something just because you didn't want to invest the time to do it.